Hey there, besties. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're continuing our recap of the manhwa, Lucia. If you're new to this series, check the description below for links to previous episodes. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to all our supporters. If you're enjoying the content and want to help keep the channel going, consider buying me a coffee. There's a link in the description below. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate all your love and support. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. After informing the guests that the party was over, Lucia remained seated in her parlor, letting out a sigh. I was careless. I didn't expect anyone to try and disrupt things. It was presumptuous of me to think my title alone would be enough to maintain control, she reflected, her cheeks flushing with a mix of sadness and frustration. I let my guard down because things here feel different from the capital. But I know better. Reputation and connections often carry more weight than rank. From the moment I met Countess Wales, I knew she wouldn't be easy to deal with. That's exactly why I asked Kate to escort Countess Corzin. If anyone could stand up to Wales, it was her. She covered her face, her mind racing. Does Countess Wales have something against illegitimate children? What she did seemed too petty for someone as calculating and influential as her. She has more to lose by humiliating me than she stands to gain. Realizing the futility of dwelling on the incident, Lucia sat back in her chair. But I'm still the Duchess, and the Duke's authority is absolute. She tried to reassure herself but couldn't ignore the larger issue. There's never been a case of an illegitimate child inheriting a noble title. If this is how people here react, what will they say in the capital? Her thoughts shifted to Hugh. He didn't seem fazed when I brought Damian to the party. Maybe it's because he's so confident that he'll always get his way. But Damian, he could be the first to set a precedent for others like him, and that's what makes everyone so uneasy. I was too impatient, she admitted. Damian's time here is short, and I was anxious we might not get another opportunity like this before he returns to the academy. He's already been introduced to several guests when we went riding, so I didn't treat this party as his formal debut. But what must he have thought in that moment? He's still so young. Lucia held her head as a slight throbbing headache set in. Where is Damian? It's been a while since I called for him, she asked, glancing at her handmaiden. We asked the young master to come inside, but he won't respond. The maid you sent earlier is just standing by his side. She's not sure what to do, the maid replied. Lucia tensed. What is he doing outside? He's just staring at the guests, the maid answered. Damian remained at the podium, his eyes scanning the guests. Their whispered comments reached him, though he wished they hadn't. Ugh, what an unfortunate situation, one lady remarked. Yes, it's awful. Why would she push it this far? Hasn't she thought of the repercussions? Another added. The Duchess seemed furious. She's usually so gentle and kind. Who knows how angry she really is, a guest murmured as they made their way out of the venue. Countess Wales froze as she walked, her steps suddenly uncertain. Why? Things weren't supposed to turn out this way. Why? She thought, trembling slightly. Lucia's harsh words echoed in her mind. I'm afraid I won't be seeing any of you off. None of you deserves that courtesy. Please show the guests the way out, Lucia had instructed the maids, her voice cutting through the tension. Today, everyone here has disrespected me, the Duchess, and Lady of the Turan house. One day, your sons and grandsons will bow their heads to my son. This is what it looks like when a parent ruins their child's future, Lucia had declared, her eyes cold as she stared down the countess before walking off, leaving Wales stunned. Even the sharpest social tacticians fumble when faced with a disaster like this, and Countess Wales was no exception. I was sure the Duchess would feel cornered and remove the young lord from the party, but nothing like that happened. This was all for your sake, Duchess, she thought, watching Lucia leave the garden. Their marriage is just for show, Wales mused. The Duchess is likely using the boy to secure her position. It's all a ruse. I didn't think she truly cared for the Duke's son. I was merely playing along, touching on her naivete, her failure to grasp the gravity of the situation. I thought that once the party was wrecked, she would retreat, her ego bruised but intact. Sooner or later, she'd realize it wasn't as terrible as she believed. In the eyes of others, she would have done her best, trying to accept a child that isn't hers and enduring the shame that followed. People would have seen her as an understanding, accepting mother. Once the dust settled, I could approach her gently, make amends, and the whole affair would be behind us. It would have been the ideal opportunity to get close to her. I had it all planned out. But now, Countess Wales's thoughts spiraled, the clarity of her plan unraveling before her eyes. What shall we do? If my husband finds out, he'll be enraged for sure, a lady whispered, drawing the attention of those nearby. Everyone knows what the Duke is like, so why even ask? This is something that happened between us women. The gentleman shouldn't be involved, another replied. Well, not everything goes according to what's appropriate, now does it? It's common knowledge that the Duke and Duchess care deeply for one another, the First Lady said. Then I'm not sure what to do. It'd be best to avoid these events for a while, said the Second Lady. Why does Countess Wales care so much about the Duke's successor? A voice murmured. Didn't you know? Count Wales has an illegitimate daughter. I heard he doted on her and even arranged her marriage to a count, someone whispered. Oh dear, you mean the in-laws of the count are illegitimate? Another gasped. What's amusing is that Countess Wales forced her daughter-in-law to legitimize two of her illegitimate grandchildren, making them part of their family, the Second Lady added, causing the First Lady to exclaim, my goodness. Meanwhile, Lucia sat quietly, her thoughts interrupted by Kate's gentle touch on her hand. Lucia, Kate said warmly, bringing her back to the moment. Lucia looked at her calmly. Kate. Thank you for today, she said softly. No need to thank me. I wasn't much help anyway. Don't think too much of it, Lucia. Think of this as a mandatory initiation rite. Don't be so hard on yourself, Kate reassured her. Yes, I know. Infine. I'm not so fragile as to feel degraded by something like this, Lucia replied evenly. And I know you did what you could, Kate. Thank you, truly, she added, holding Kate's hand affectionately. Though it was only in a dream, I've waited on a noblewoman as her maid. I'm just upset, she thought to herself. Is His Grace in his office? Lucia asked Jerome after Kate had left. No, Your Grace. He left after receiving an urgent message. I can't say for certain if he'll return today, Jerome replied, looking tense. I see, Lucia sighed. On one hand, I'm relieved. On the other, a bit sad that he's not here, she mused. I'll inform him of what happened personally, so please don't say anything, she instructed Jerome. Yes, Your Grace, he replied. Just then, Damian entered the room quietly. And please call for Anna. I think I'll need something for my headache, Lucia added. Of course, Your Grace. Please rest until Anna arrives, Jerome said before exiting the room. Damian stood still, the silence between them thick. His head hung low, his face shadowed with sadness. Damian, Lucia called gently, drawing his gaze. Come here, she said, gesturing for him to approach. Damian remained quiet as he approached Lucia, stepping gently towards her. When he reached her, he fell to his knees, head bowed, a sad expression on his face. Damian, Lucia exclaimed, rising from her seat in alarm. I'm sorry, this is my fault, Damian whispered. No, Damian. This isn't your fault, Lucia said, her face softening with sadness. Why are you apologizing? She wondered, her mind racing back to the events of the party. She dropped to her knees and hugged him tightly. Damian, surprised by her embrace, remained silent. I'm sorry, Lucia whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Damian never asked to attend. I forced him to come today, and now look at what's happened, she thought bitterly. I was selfish, only thinking about what I wanted. I should have considered your feelings. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking as she began to cry. I'm all right, Damian said quietly. Really, I was fine. I didn't care about those ladies. What they thought meant nothing to me, he thought. He had grown used to the whispers, the judgmental stares. It wasn't as if any real harm had been done. But seeing Lucia in tears stirred something deep within him. None of this is your fault, Damian, Lucia repeated, sobbing. What those people did, it had nothing to do with you. They're adults. They should know better. Her tears continued to fall, her voice breaking with emotion. I didn't care how others saw me, Damian thought, still held in her embrace. Why is she crying? He felt his own tears forming as he hugged her back. I'm sorry, Lucia whispered again. It's okay, Lucia, Damian said softly. The moment you called me your son, whatever they said didn't matter anymore. So please don't cry on my behalf. He wanted to say those words aloud, but the tears choked his voice. No one had ever cried for me before, he realized as they stayed locked in their embrace, mother and son, both shedding quiet tears. Later that evening, Duke Hugo returned from his expedition. Jerome, caught off guard, quickly rushed to greet him. Your Grace, Jerome said, his voice tense. Apologies, I wasn't informed of your return. That's because I told them not to make a fuss, Duke Hugo replied casually. What about dinner? He asked. It's being prepared, Your Grace, Jerome assured him as they walked into the castle. Seems I'm just in time, Duke Hugo said, striding ahead. Did he rush back to have dinner with Her Grace? Jerome wondered, momentarily stunned. In his office, Duke Hugo sat down, clearly exhausted. But his expression changed as he saw the stack of paperwork waiting for him. I can't get a break, can I? He muttered to himself, sifting through the documents. Nothing went awry at the garden party? He asked, his eyes on the papers. Jerome tensed, remembering Lucia's instructions. She wanted to inform the Duke herself. He nodded slightly, choosing his words carefully. Yes, Your Grace, he replied. I see. Let me know when dinner is ready, Duke Hugo said. Of course, Your Grace, Jerome replied, bowing slightly before leaving the room. Outside the castle, Jerome hurried over to Sir Hever, a sense of urgency in his steps. Sir Hever, what happened? Jerome asked, drawing the knight's attention. I thought you said it was unlikely His Grace would return today? Oh, that, Sir Hever said with a shrug. Turns out it wasn't a plague. One of the merchants was selling mushrooms at a low price, but they were poisonous. The villagers got sick from the poisoning. His Grace ordered the merchant to be tracked down for selling faulty produce and left the rest to the landlord in charge. Jerome nodded, feeling his tension rise. So that's why His Grace returned so soon. But this isn't good. Will Her Grace be ready by dinner? He thought, his mind racing with worry. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Lucia nearly jumped when her maid informed her of Duke Hugo's return. What? His Grace is back. Lucia exclaimed, her voice almost a yell. Where is he now? He's in his office, Your Grace, the maid answered calmly. I guess I'll see him at supper, Lucia thought, trying to steady herself. Could you bring me a cold, wet cloth? She asked the maid. Of course, Your Grace, the maid replied, hurrying off to fetch the cloth. Lucia sighed, glancing at her reflection. Oh no, my eyes are all puffy from crying. I don't want him to see that I cried over something so trivial, she thought, feeling a wave of embarrassment wash over her. As she left her room, she spotted Jerome and immediately confronted him. Jerome, you said he wouldn't be back today, Lucia exclaimed, her frustration evident. I said he might not come back, Your Grace, Jerome replied with a small, apologetic smile, hoping to ease the tension. Not that he definitely wouldn't. Lucia sighed, shaking her head slightly but allowing a small smile to break through. Jerome's light-hearted tone had a way of calming her nerves, even when she was flustered. Lucia dabbed her swollen eyes with the cold cloth, but it didn't seem to help much. My eyes are still puffy. I shouldn't be this upset over what happened, she thought, staring at her reflection in the mirror. I've been in a bad mood all day, with a headache, and haven't rested at all. No wonder the swelling won't go down. She sighed, thinking back to her feelings of guilt toward Damian. I cried so much over how I treated him, I don't think I have any tears left. I need to talk to him, she thought, her hands pausing as she touched her eyes again. Can you tell I've been crying? She asked the maid. It's not very obvious, Your Grace, the maid replied, though she looked uneasy. I just need to get through dinner, Lucia told herself. I'll talk to him at night, when I'm calmer. I wonder how he will react. Probably just nod, not make a fuss about it, she thought, as she sat at the dining table with Damian. When Duke Hugo entered, his gaze immediately went to Lucia. He'll probably think nothing of it, she continued, but as he sat down, the silence between them felt heavy. Duke Hugo looked at Lucia, noticing her lowered head. Without a word, he reached over and gently lifted her chin, startling her. Their eyes met, and he saw the redness from her tears. "What happened?" he asked, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of concern. "Did you cry?" Lucia tried to avert her gaze. "Let's just have dinner," she said quietly. "Why?" he pressed, his eyes narrowing. "Jerome," Duke Hugo called, demanding answers. Jerome stepped forward, looking tense. "There was an incident at the garden party, Your Grace. The guests engaged in what we call party wrecking," he explained. "Party wrecking?" Duke Hugo repeated, confused. "It's when attendees deliberately ruin a social event by remaining silent, creating an oppressive atmosphere," Jerome continued. "And why did this happen?" Duke Hugo asked, his voice hardening. Jerome hesitated. "It was because of young Master Damian," he said. Duke Hugo's jaw clenched. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. "I thought she could handle this on her own. I should have been there, should have known those vipers would turn on her. I was too careless," he thought, still gently holding Lucia's face as he saw the sadness in her eyes. "What did they do to you?" Duke Hugo demanded, pulling her gaze back to him. They did nothing," Lucia whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Hugo's expression softened in shock as he saw the tears begin to spill down her cheeks. Without hesitation, he scooped her up in his arms, holding her close to his chest. "Bring our meals upstairs," he instructed Jerome. Then, turning to Damian, he added, "Finish your dinner here and return to your room afterward." "Yes, sir," Damian replied, wide-eyed and confused. With Lucia in his arms, Duke Hugo left the dining room. As Damian watched them leave, a deep sadness settled in. Lucia didn't leave her room all day. "I hope tomorrow I'll see Mother smiling again," he thought. In their room, Lucia's tears soaked into Hugo's chest as she sobbed uncontrollably. He held her gently, rubbing her back in a comforting rhythm, though her crying only grew louder. "I don't even know why," she thought. "But when Hugh held me so warmly, I couldn't stop. It was like I was a child again, and someone finally understood how I felt." Lucia's pain wasn't about the garden party. It ran deeper. The sorrow she'd held in for years since losing her mother, since living in the palace, began to pour out, overwhelming her. "For the first time, it felt like someone was telling me that none of what happened was my fault," she thought, the tears still flowing. As her sobs slowly subsided, Duke Hugo's fury simmered beneath his calm demeanor. How dare they make Vivian cry like this? He thought. What could they have possibly done to upset her so much? Those frivolous women, always gossiping and scheming. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Despite his anger, he remained quiet, holding her as she sniffled against him. "Vivian may seem gentle on the outside, but I know she's strong. She's clever and resilient." His mind raced with thoughts of retribution, yet his hands remained gentle as she finally pulled away, drying her eyes. "Are you done crying?" he asked calmly. "I should wash my face," Lucia murmured, suddenly aware of the wet patch her tears had left on his shirt. "Your clothes are soaked because of me," she added, her voice filled with embarrassment as she reached out, unbuttoning his shirt to help him change. As she nervously undid the buttons, her eyes briefly met the sight of his bare chest, causing her to blush. She gulped, flustered. "I'll get you something to change into," she said, attempting to move away. But Hugo caught her hand, a smirk crossing his face. "Keep going," he whispered, watching her with amusement. Lucia sat quietly, her heart racing as she watched Duke Hugo. Their eyes met, locking into each other's gaze as her heart raced faster. How is it that his crimson eyes can feel so cold? She thought, her mind drifting. She couldn't even remember when she first noticed that about him. As he gently guided her hand to his chest, she felt the intensity behind his gaze, one that now burned with something fiery. Does he always look at the women who share his bed like this? She wondered. An image of Sophia Lawrence, pleading for his love, flashed through her mind. At the time, I couldn't understand her desperation, Lucia thought. But now, after seeing his indifference, I can't help but wonder. Who wouldn't beg for the gaze that once made them feel special? She leaned forward, their lips meeting in a deep kiss. This should be enough for me, she told herself. I shouldn't want more, but my feelings for him keep growing. She had promised herself to love him only to a certain point, but each time he showed her affection, she found herself falling deeper. "No," she whispered inwardly, breaking the kiss. "You haven't eaten because of me. You must be starving," she said softly, trying to regain composure. "You're talking about dinner at a time like this?" Hugo echoed, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned forward, kissing her again, this time more intensely. His hand slid down her leg, turning her gently in her chair. "Wait, Hugh," she said, feeling the tension rise. "I can't wait," he murmured, pressing against her. "But your dinner," she insisted. "It's just one meal," he replied. "But I'm hungry too," Lucia added, her voice soft but firm. He paused, glancing at her before lifting her up. "Then let's eat." "I can't have you starve, though it's fine if I do," he said with a slight grin. He's quick to change his mind, Lucia thought, giving him a small, tense smile. They had dinner in her room, sharing a quiet moment together. Afterward, as they sat close, Hugo asked, "Are you still upset?" "No," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You comforted me, so I feel much better now. It helped to cry like that. Haven't you ever felt that way?" she asked. Hugo's gaze lowered, his expression darkening slightly as memories from the past surfaced. "I can't say," he replied quietly, lost in a moment he couldn't forget. Duke Hugo's expression darkened as memories resurfaced, recalling that cold winter night when he had found his brother's lifeless body in the tower. His gaze had been sad, yet no tears had come. "I don't think I have ever cried," he said quietly, meeting Lucia's gaze. "Now, tell me what happened." "It's just as Jerome said," Lucia replied, letting out a soft sigh. "The garden party was ruined. Bringing Damian upset the guests, but I didn't want to play along with their behavior, so I ended it. It wasn't really that big of a deal." "Not a big deal," he repeated, his voice firm. "You were bawling your eyes out. Tell me what else happened." "That was really all," she said, sounding exhausted. "I was careless, but what truly hurt me was Damian. I felt terrible for what he must have felt, and that's what really got to me." "Is that everything?" he asked again, his tone more demanding. "Of course," she replied, her expression steady. Lucia seemed to have calmed down, and Hugo watched her closely. "She's not going to say more," he thought. "He's not as fragile as you think," he finally said, his voice softening. "Yes, I know," she smiled, a hint of warmth in her eyes. "He's your son, after all." Duke Hugo glanced at Lucia, his thoughts stirring. She never asked about Damian. "I thought she didn't care for him. But to think she'd shed so many tears for him." He turned to her, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Why didn't you ask me anything about Damian before he came here?" he asked. Lucia went quiet. "Because you never spoke of him first. I thought it was a topic I wasn't allowed to bring up." "Why?" he pressed. "Back when I first visited you at the estate in the capital, I could tell you were reluctant to speak of him," she explained. "Did I seem that way?" he asked. "Don't you think if I pushed, you'd question my intentions, even after we got married?" She's not wrong, Hugo thought, his gaze shifting away. "I would have found it suspicious if she had shown interest in Damian." His face tensed as he considered her words. "She's oddly perceptive about things like this. The documents for Damian's legitimation aren't complete yet. That's why I called him here," he admitted. Lucia frowned. "The process isn't done? I thought you'd already handled it." "I know you agreed to my plans for Damian before our engagement, but I wouldn't finalize anything without consulting you first," Duke Hugo replied, noticing the surprise on her face. "You thought I'd just register him into the family without telling you," he added, his tone growing defensive. "Go ahead, paint me as the villain. I know what you think of me." Lucia felt a pang of guilt. "That's not what I think at all," she exclaimed. "Then what do you think?" he asked, watching her closely. "You're a very capable landlord," she stammered, feeling awkward. "I never imagined the North was such a pleasant place before I came here." Hugo raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly what I wanted to hear," he thought. "So Damian is officially my son now?" she asked, steering the conversation back. "Yes, he is," he confirmed. Lucia's expression softened. "Damian is truly my son now," she thought. No worry of dissolution, This isn't like an adoption. Even if we divorced, he'd still be mine. Her heart steadied as the realization sank in. Since he's your son, do as you see fit. You can pester him all you want, Hugo teased, wrapping an arm around her. Just make sure he's not the annoying one. Damian would never annoy me. And I wouldn't annoy him either, she protested, her tone serious. You just don't know him well enough. Even though he's your son, he's kind and sweet. Duke Hugo leaned in, his gaze sharp. How can you be so sure? Lucia froze, her heart skipping a beat. What? She stammered. That he's like me? Hugo pressed. Lucia gulped, searching for the right words. Because he's like you? She ventured slowly. Hugo's eyes darkened. Then you should be even more careful. You know the rumors about me, don't you? His voice sent a chill down her spine. The rumor about you drinking blood? Lucia blurted out, immediately regretting it as she saw his stunned expression. Oh no. She covered her mouth, her face flushing with embarrassment. What I mean is there's a rumor about you, she exclaimed, trying to calm the atmosphere. Drinking blood? Hugo echoed, still taken aback. No one's ever said that to my face before. A chuckle escaped him, the absurdity of it lightening the mood. Lucia exhaled in relief. At least he's not angry. I don't believe it, of course, she said quickly. It's just a rumor. But it's not completely untrue though, Hugo said with a smirk. You do get a taste of blood during war. Oh right, Lucia replied, absent-mindedly nodding. Is that what you were curious about? He asked, amused. Not really. Maybe a little, but that was a long time ago. I don't think you drink blood now, she said, her face turning red. Hugo laughed. Any other rumors I should know about? I don't know, she mumbled. I must say, you're a daring woman. What were you thinking, asking a bloodthirsty monster to be your husband? He teased, gently bumping his forehead against hers. Please don't tease me, Lucia whispered, before he kissed her. They lingered in the kiss, but Lucia eventually pulled away, pushing him lightly. Stop. You have work to do, she reminded him. So? He asked, not moving. I'm getting up too. I've had a long day, and my head hurts. I need some air, so I'm going for a walk, Lucia said, springing from her seat. You. Get to work, she playfully urged him toward the door. Hugo remained calm, watching her push him out. I suppose there's always a chance before bedtime, he mused before leaving. Later that night, he returned to her bedchamber. Go to your room and sleep there, Lucia said firmly, closing her book. Hugo looked bewildered. Again. Why? I'm tired, I can't handle you tonight. Besides, I don't think I'd enjoy myself, she said, her tone teasing but firm. This is all because of those damn women. I'll get back at them for this, Hugo thought, flinching inwardly in frustration. All right. I'll just sleep quietly next to you, he said, moving closer to her bed. Really? I don't believe you, Lucia eyed him skeptically as he sat beside her. I kept my promise yesterday, didn't I? He reminded her. Hugo quickly slid under the covers, cuddling close to her. I'll just sleep like this, he murmured, his hand resting against her chest. Lucia's face flushed as she felt his touch. Move your hand, she protested. Stop squirming. You'll only provoke me if you keep moving, Hugo warned, his body pressing against hers. Lucia's heart raced. I can feel something against my skin, she thought, her face burning as she realized just how close they were. Give me a little space, Lucia said, almost stammering, her face still flushed. Why? Are you feeling tempted? Hugo teased, a small smile playing on his lips. Of course not. She quickly replied, her face reddening even more. You've been so busy with your party and spending time with Damian. Now that it's over and his legitimation is settled, don't you think you should pay a little more attention to your husband? He said playfully. I won't try anything. I'll just sleep as I am, he added, his hand giving a gentle squeeze. Lucia hesitated. He said Damian, she thought. Do you dislike Damian? She asked, turning to meet his gaze. No, I don't, Hugo replied without hesitation. Then why did you send him to boarding school? She pressed. I told you, because I couldn't properly look after him, Hugo explained. Even so, it's rare to hear of a duke's heir being sent away like that, she said, sitting up slightly. There's no rule that says I have to do things the way others do, he responded, his tone calm. And besides, the Academy's status was rising at the time. Nobles from all over the world sent their children there to form connections with other high-ranking families. In 10 years, graduating from Exium Academy will be essential for nobles. It'll be beneficial for Damian's future, he added, more to himself than to her. So, you thought that was what was best for him? Lucia asked, her voice tense. Yes, Hugo answered simply. He's honest, she realized, watching his face. Every time she'd asked him a question, even if he didn't elaborate, he always told the truth. Does that mean he'll answer anything I ask? She wondered. Why didn't you visit Damian after sending him to the academy? Weekly reports of his well-being are placed on my desk. I knew he was doing fine, so I didn't feel the need, he explained. He really does answer everything. She thought, amazed. He has his reasons for everything, even if I don't fully understand them. Hugo gently stroked her face. Your eyes are still swollen, he said softly, leaning in closer. I might have cried a bit too much. Hopefully, the swelling will be gone by tomorrow, Lucia replied, resting her head against him, hugging him gently. Who started it? Hugo asked, his voice drawing her attention. Lucia glanced up, seeing the warm smile on his face. She quickly shifted her expression, her gaze turning cold. No, you can't, she said firmly. I can't what? Hugo asked, his brow furrowing. Whatever it is you're planning to do, don't. You can't involve yourself with what happened at the party. She insisted. Hugh, promise me you won't interfere. I'll do what I see fit, he replied casually. Hugh, no, she protested. If you care about me at all, you won't. They'll all take it out on me because they can't show disapproval towards you. Please, don't get involved. Who would dare? He demanded, his voice laced with frustration. Hugh, Lucia pressed on, her voice trembling as she sniffed, her eyes welling up with tears. She leaned forward, trying to soften his resolve. Fine, he said at last, his face flushing slightly as he looked away. Lucia's eyes brightened. Then I can take your word for it? She asked excitedly. I said fine, didn't I? He gave her a tense smile. You're not just going to sweep this under the rug, are you? Hugo questioned, his tone still uneasy. Absolutely not, Lucia replied confidently. I'm not naive enough to just sit and do nothing. I'll take care of things, so please don't worry. You really don't need my help at all? He asked as he lay down. I'll ask if I do, Lucia assured him. Will there ever be a day when you do need me? Hugo wondered silently as she snuggled against him, a contented smile on her face. You'll be fine even without me. You don't need my help and you don't love me, he thought inwardly, pulling the bed sheet over her gently. Vivian, he called softly. Yes? Lucia responded, her voice quiet. Vivian, he said again, leaning closer. Yes? She replied, smiling this time. He called her once more, and she answered with a laugh. You were uncomfortable the first time I called you by your name, he murmured, cuddling her. Well, yes, Lucia admitted. But now it feels natural, he said, his tone softer. It does, she agreed. I've gotten used to it after hearing it so many times. Inwardly, Lucia reflected on how her feelings toward the name Vivian had changed. It had once represented the Duke's wife, not her. Vivian was the girl who never lived through the hardships Lucia had endured in her dreams. Vivian had found happiness, and the misery Lucia had feared never crossed into her waking life. Each time Hugo called her Vivian, it made her heart skip a beat, because she was the only one he addressed so sweetly. He is the only man who calls me Vivian, now and forever, she thought. Is that so? Hugo said, watching her closely. Why won't she tell me her childhood name? Does she not care for me enough? I want to ask, but what if her answer confirms my worst fears? He wondered. Is she only sharing my bed because of duty? Will she never love me? Lucia yawned, breaking his thoughts. I really should sleep now, she said softly. The words almost slip out every time we're together. If she tells me once more that she will never love me, I don't know if I'll be able to bear it, he thought, a dull sadness settling over him. "Vivian," he called again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes?" she answered, already drifting off. Watching her sleep peacefully, Hugo held her close, squeezing her slightly. "Why do I feel this sorrow? You're right here in my arms, yet it hurts. I'm terrified I might lose you forever." Even though I've never felt any sort of pain before, he thought as he finally allowed sleep to claim him, the weight of unspoken fears heavy on his heart. The next day, Duke Hugo summoned his vassals to announce that young Master Damian had been officially legitimized. "Jerome, bring me the guest list from the garden party," he instructed, drawing Jerome's attention. But Her Grace, Jerome hesitated, visibly tense. Duke Hugo shot him a stern look, and Jerome quickly handed over the list to the gathered vassals. The atmosphere grew tense as the vassals exchanged confused glances. "Those of you on this list," Duke Hugo said, his tone sharp, "would be wise to keep a close eye on your family's actions." His words sparked quiet fear among them, with one count feeling a chill run down his spine, convinced that the warning implied much more than was said. "Technically, I didn't cross any of Vivian's boundaries," Duke Hugo thought, satisfied with his handling of the situation. "I didn't do anything physically." Jerome, however, felt his anxiety rise. "I can't believe he did this. This won't end well for the ladies who attended that party. Another rumor's bound to start, and then I'll never hear the end of it from Fabian," he worried. Sure enough, a rumor soon spread throughout the north. Anyone who crossed the Duchess would face the Duke's wrath, a deadly and fiery one, they said. A week later, life in Rome resumed its usual tranquility. Lucia behaved no differently, and the household staff quickly moved on from the event. But Damian couldn't forget. "I felt so powerless," he thought, holding tightly to the fox cub, recalling the whispers from the garden party. "If father were here, this wouldn't have happened. I'm weak," his fist clenched at the thought. "I couldn't protect her, not as I am now. It's not just because I'm still a child, but because I have no power. Being young is only an excuse. I know how young I am," he reflected, thinking back to the academy where he was often the youngest in his class. Although some students looked down on him for his age and uncertain background, they never crossed the line due to his academic excellence. "One's capability defines one's power," he thought, clenching his fist harder. "That's the most valuable truth I've learned." At Exium Academy, there was an elite student group known as the Circle, whose influence permeated the entire school. The head student, called Sita, held significant power, and all members of the Circle were upperclassmen. Because of this, Damian had never interacted with them. Yet, whenever they appeared in the courtyard, other students treated them like royalty, parting to let them pass. Damian observed this ritual many times, but it never interested him. His only concern was to graduate without causing trouble. However, after recent events, his perspective had changed. "Now, my goal is to take on father's title," he thought as he approached Jerome. "I wish to see my father," Damian said politely. Led to Duke Hugo's office, Damian reflected on his past thoughts. "I never considered why I wanted to become the Duke or what I'd do after. All I knew was that it was my purpose," he mused. Inside the office, Duke Hugo glanced up from his paperwork. "Will this take long?" he asked, sounding preoccupied. "No, sir. I came to tell you that I wish to return to the academy," Damian stated. Duke Hugo barely paused, continuing to flip through the pages before him. "It doesn't seem likely that you'll be able to keep up with this semester's classes," he replied. "I know, but if I return now, I can attend the summer sessions and make up for any missed credits," Damian explained. "You can still graduate even if you miss a semester," Duke Hugo pointed out. "I want to get the best grades possible," Damian insisted. "I've told you before, you only need to graduate," the Duke said, pausing his writing. "Yes, I remember. But this is what I want," Damian replied firmly. "Why?" Duke Hugo asked, his attention finally focused on Damian. "To protect someone important to me," Damian thought, picturing Lucia's smile. "I want to grow stronger by elevating my capabilities," he answered, conviction clear in his voice. "You want to elevate your capability?" Duke Hugo asked, glancing up. "Scholars don't rule the world. How can you prove that the skills you've acquired at the academy will help you grow stronger? My title is yours as long as you graduate." The power that comes with being Duke is considerable, he said, returning to his writing. Damian's gaze dropped to the floor. It doesn't matter if I graduate with average scores or at the top of my class. Either way, I'll inherit the title when I finish at the academy. He clenched his fist. But I don't want it handed to me. I want to earn it. Damian respected his father, a knight of unmatched skill and the strongest person he knew. But he also recognized he would never live the same way. I need to build on my own strengths, he thought. The knowledge he gained at the academy was his greatest asset, and the highest goal he could reach there was to become the Seater. I wish to become the Seater, Damian declared, meeting his father's eyes. Duke Hugo paused his writing, looking up. The Seater, Damian began to explain, but Duke Hugo cut him off. I know, he said. He was well aware of the Seater's growing influence, especially since the war. By the time Damian graduated, the position would carry immense weight, likely more than that of a king in some remote nation. If he becomes the Seater, his reputation as a bastard won't matter anymore, Duke Hugo thought. Though I doubt he's thought that far ahead. Reports had never mentioned Damian being interested in anything beyond his studies, and this sudden desire for power puzzled him. That position isn't given for high marks alone, he warned. I know, Damian replied, determined. Remember this, having mediocre power is worse than having none at all. If you want to be the best, you must raise yourself to a position where no one can challenge you, Duke Hugo said. Yes, sir, Damian responded, absorbing every word. Do you know you've been registered under your mother? Duke Hugo asked, causing Damian's face to flush. Yes. Mother already told me, Damian replied, feeling shy. Let her know that you'll be returning to the academy, the Duke instructed. Yes, sir, Damian said. And do not kill anyone at the academy, Duke Hugo added sternly, his voice cold. It would be rather difficult to manage. Should anything of the sort occur, contact the estate before informing the academy staff. Yes, sir, Damian replied, his body tense. Father truly is terrifying, he thought. Then I'll take my leave, Damian said calmly. All right, Duke Hugo responded as Damian left his office. For a moment, the Duke sat in thought, recalling Damian's request. He wants to become the Seater? Looking at his son, he noticed how much Damian had grown. With a grin, he mused, your son is far more driven than you ever were, as he relaxed into his chair, a smile spreading across his face. Later, during tea time, Damian broke the news to Lucia. You're leaving for the academy already? Are you still upset about what happened at the garden party? She asked, her face full of concern. Not at all. It's time for me to return if I want to catch up with my studies, Damian explained. I know I should support your decision, but hearing you're leaving tomorrow morning feels so sudden, Lucia said sadly. She hesitated, considering asking if he would be back next year, but stopped, reflecting on what was to come. Next year, when the king passes away, we'll likely return to the capital. So many in the north already disdain Damian. How much worse will it be in the capital? She wondered if it would be best for Damian to remain at the academy until he was old enough to make his official debut into high society. Will anything change by then? She wondered. Is something the matter? Damian asked, pulling her from her thoughts. Lucia looked at him silently for a moment, then shook off her worries. No, I have to believe things will be different, she thought, her face brightening. If you're leaving tomorrow, you don't need to study today, right? Would you like to spend more time together? She asked excitedly. I'd love to hear more about what it's like at the academy. Of course, Damian agreed, blushing as he began to share his experiences. They exchanged smiles throughout, enjoying the moment together. The day of Damian's departure arrived swiftly. The castle's servants gathered outside as he prepared to leave. Take care of your health and study hard, Lucia told him softly. Yes, I will, Damian replied. Don't skip meals, and be careful not to fall ill, she added, her voice warm with concern. Duke Hugo, standing beside her, gently interjected, I think he understands your worries, Lucia. Startled, she tensed. Oh right, she said, relaxing a bit. Damian offered her a reassuring smile. What else, Lucia said, thinking aloud. Your Grace, Jerome called, stepping forward with a covered basket. Thank you, she said, accepting it. Turning back to Damian, she said, I think Osha already considers you his owner. You should take him with you. She handed him the basket. I thought you were raising him for the fox hunts? Damian asked, holding the basket. I was, she replied, but watching them is just as enjoyable. I'm not sure if the academy allows pets, Damian said, concerned. Don't worry, Lucia said cheerfully, turning to Duke Hugo with a smile. Your father will handle it, right? She asked as he nodded in agreement. I hope Osha will bring you comfort while you're away, she said, her tone calm. Damian remained silent for a moment before responding, thank you. I should leave now. He passed the basket to a servant. Of course, Lucia said, her voice soft. Then I bid you farewell, Damian said, bowing as he made his way toward the carriage. Wait, Damian, Lucia called after him. She hesitated briefly before asking, may I hug you before you go? Damian watched her for a moment, then nodded. Yes. Lucia quickly embraced him, warmth radiating from the gesture. It was clear to Damian how much the Duke and Duchess cared for each other. He realized Duke Hugo hadn't just married out of duty, there was genuine affection between them. And with that love, a child would likely be born, a legitimate heir. The position I hold is fragile, like a sandcastle at the water's edge, Damian thought. I could never stand above a rightful heir. But it doesn't matter. My only wish is to protect the warmth of Roam so that mother never loses her smile, he said inwardly. My days were brighter because you were here, Lucia told him softly. Mine too, Damian replied. I'll write to you, so please write back, she said. I will, he assured her. I'll miss you so very much, she added, and Damian's eyes widened in surprise. I will too, he said, his face flushing with emotion. Damian thought to himself, I don't think I'll ever forget this moment. Mother's loving expression and the cool air of this season. I will always remember her tender embrace. This memory will stay with me as I grow stronger. As they shared a warm hug, Damian said, Mother, his voice gentle as they pulled apart, though I'm unsure when we'll see each other again, until then please take care. He then bent down and kissed her hand with affection. Lucia blushed, tears forming in her eyes. Damian smiled brightly, letting go of her hand before turning back to his carriage. As it set out for the academy, he felt a sense of peace. In the future, if I have a younger sibling who becomes the heir, I will gladly hand over my position. These precious feelings I cherish will never change, Damian thought, feeling content as the carriage carried him away. In her room, Lucia sat quietly on her bed, lost in thought. Damian's gone, she reflected, remembering the sound of him calling her mother for the first time. I won't hear that again for a while. A small smile crept across her face, though her cheeks turned red as she wondered, since when did he become such a smooth talker? Your Grace, your bathwater is ready, a maid said, but Lucia didn't hear her. He really is his father's son. But no, she thought, clenching her fist. No, I won't let him grow up to be a heartbreaker like his father. The maid called out again, but Lucia remained deep in thought. There's no way I'm going to raise him that way. Determination flared in her eyes as the maid's voice grew louder, but still, Lucia didn't respond. At first, she had pitied Damian, thinking he was forced to grow up too fast. But I worried for nothing, she realized. Damian isn't mature because of his circumstances. He was just born that way. He thinks on the level of an adult. A soft sigh escaped her as the thought settled in. He's gifted. Lucia was certain Damian would never experience a typical childhood. His mind is far beyond his years. She then recalled another child from her dreams, one who shared similarities with Damian, Count Metten's third son Bruno. Bruno, praised as a genius by his tutors, had been just a year older than Damian. The first time Lucia met him, he was 12, and it was hard to believe he was the Count's son. He looked nothing like his father, and his rebellious nature stood in stark contrast to his family. Bruno caused trouble wherever he could, cleverly driving his tutors to quit with his tricks. Eventually, the Count sent him to an academy, under the guise of furthering his education. Bruno, despite his defiance, was highly mature for his age. So, it's not my first time dealing with an intelligent and mature boy, Lucia mused. But Damian. He's different. Special. Aside from their brilliance, Damian and Bruno were nothing alike. Damian is much cuter and far more lovable, Lucia thought, her face warming with the memory. Oh, I miss him so much already, her thoughts drifted, sadness touching her gaze. Suddenly, she felt Duke Hugo's hands gently cup her face, lifting her eyes to meet his. She gasped softly, surprised by the sudden closeness. Why is Hugh here already? I haven't even bathed yet, she thought, tension rising. Without a word, Hugo leaned forward, kissing her softly, his hand sliding into her dress as he pressed closer. Realizing where this was headed, Lucia gently pulled back. Wait, she said, despite the charged atmosphere between them. Why? Hugo asked, his voice low with longing. I haven't washed yet, she replied, her cheeks flushed. It doesn't matter, he said, leaning in for another kiss, but Lucia quickly blocked his lips with her hand. Yes, it does, she insisted. So, you want to take a bath now? Hugo asked, sounding slightly frustrated. Yes, she said firmly. Hugo paused, a hint of disappointment on his face. Are you doing this on purpose? He asked, a bit wounded. Doing what on purpose? She asked, genuinely confused. Never mind, he muttered, a faint sigh escaping him. She really knows how to drive someone mad, he thought to himself. Without warning, Hugo scooped her up into his arms, startling her. Hugh? What are you doing? Lucia asked, her eyes wide. Stay still. You said you wanted a bath, he replied, carrying her towards the bathroom. Yes, but Lucia tried to protest, but before she could stop him, Hugo opened the door and stepped inside with her still in his arms. Oh my God, Lucia thought, her face turning bright red as the maids inside the bathroom gasped in shock. Oh dear! They exclaimed, quickly dashing out of the room, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Lucia buried her face in her hands. Oh my God, she muttered, mortified. I told you to stay still, Hugo said, still holding her, entirely unfazed. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.